Do you always understand that from the beginning?
I suppose that's one of the real strengths of working with your partner, is that you do learn about yourself and the other person really fast.
Did services pivot as you grew? Did you change the business model as you grew?
I think you can sometimes reach really interesting destinations by not setting a course too early.
For new businesses, it's very hard sometimes to go green, because electric cars are expensive, the green energy expensive, recyclable things are expensive.
Lots of people making lots of little steps is better than a few people trying to be extreme.
Is 1% big tax?
Well.
Hello and welcome to another episode of TED Talks. Today with us, Will King. Is it correct?
That is correct, yeah. That is my current name.
Will is founder of EpixMEDIA creative agency. And what we're going to talk about today, Tommy?
A range of stuff. So we want to ask Will, I want to ask Will how he started the agency, why he started it, but also get some advice really on how he's grown it. Because I think for me, Epix are probably the one, not necessarily to chase, but the agency to look up to in Lincoln. So we dragged you here to pick your brains, to hear your radio voice. So can you introduce yourself in that radio voice? Is that?
Yeah, just for you, right? So I was saying in my early career, like I've done enough little voiceover guide tracks that you start getting really sick of the sound of your own voice. So I was lucky enough to start my career working with some people that had done local radio, and they kind of told me some of the tricks. So one of them is to put your voice in the back of your throat and raise things up and then down at the end. So on that note, I'm Will King from EpixMEDIA, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Brill.
Happy?
I can't believe I did that on a podcast. Anyway, go on.
Are you happy?
Really happy,
Yeah,
mate.
good.
I think that was really good. Yeah. So Epix, when did it start?
Epix, because there's a couple of ways of telling this story. So let me tell you the one that's kind of clearest. So Epix kind of started by accident, right? And it was in 2010. My now wife Zoe left a job in web development. So she's a self-taught web developer, which is just nuts. I don't know how. I've got enormous respect for anyone that can teach themselves something that complex. I can't get my head into it. So she'd left a job there, had about a week of freelancing, trying to work out how things were going to work, and went to a networking group one Friday morning, met some people. They took her under her wing, and she started out as a sort of one-man band web dev agency. Now, in sort of 2010, it was the back end of the last great recession. There were lots of people being made redundant and then setting up their own businesses. And I think for those people, they were Zoe was quite a refreshing sort of breath of fresh air. So she was, kind of ambitious. She really wanted to help people, really dedicated to helping these people get off the ground. So she made all sorts of small business websites, micro business websites, just to help those people get started. And bless her, because she was kind of not that confident yet in meeting all these new people, I'd go along with her. So at that stage, I was working as a video producer for a corporate production agency in Nottingham that's still going. Really good bunch of guys over there, working in mainly utilities and quite big FTSE 100 companies, that sort of thing. So I'd kind of go to these networking events with her, and I'd meet all these people, and then have to say goodbye at 7:45 in the morning and drive all the way to Nottingham and do a day's work there. So I got to this point where I thought I'd grown as far as I could there. Zoe had sort of got Epix to this point where it's starting to sustain. And I thought, well, maybe I can join it as a video producer and bolt video to web, which is not always the most logical of like pairings, but we got on and made it work. So yeah, I jumped ship and joined it in 2011, and then we kind of grew it to 2 people. We took 2 on at the same time, and then have kind of grown fairly steadily ever since.
Okay, yeah, because that was something I wondered. Because obviously, I know you, I know Zoe, and I was wondering where did the business fit with the relationship. So
yeah,
I was wondering, was it something that you decided to start together, or was it something that you met doing and then merged?
I suppose I probably need to explain that. Yeah, me and Zoe have been together like a long time. a long time. So we both came to University of Lincoln in 2004, met at the very beginning of 2005, I think, and have been together ever since. So we went through years 2 and 3 of uni together, working on projects together. Then kind of, did the usual things, got a flat and, got a car and all that sort of stuff. And then decided to run a business together. And so many people go, oh my God, I couldn't work with my partner. Oh my God, it would drive me mad. Oh my God. And they ask us like, how do you do it? What's the secret? And I still haven't worked it out. We just work.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I worked with my fiance for, it was like a month.
Right.
She was really helpful. Okay, so she worked for an agency in Lincoln. She got made redundant. And then after that kind of redundancy period had ended, she came to us for a bit, just while she was looking for something to do. Really helpful. It was a weird dynamic, though. It was a weird dynamic.
What do you mean by that?
Because I was like everything she did was great, but the expectations on her seemed higher
From you?
From me.
Why?
So it's kind of like, well, why isn't it done yet? Why haven't you done that?
Yeah.
And she was really helpful. I genuinely really enjoyed having her in. But there was like just certain times where I was like, oh, smashed it and ruined it. But there were certain times where
Exactly what happened when she was working with you.
just ruined. Where I just sort of think like the expectations on you are so much higher because I wouldn't get I was kind of like not angry but like annoyed at small things. But I don't get annoyed with any of my staff ever.
There's a real risk, I think, when you know the person that well of being too familiar with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to really check your levels and your kind of boundaries at times because that person so much deeper than anyone you'll ever employ.
Yeah.
And that level of familiarity can mean you sort of you can go from 0 to 60 faster, which I don't know why. That's not a good thing. Like you do have to really work on the way you communicate. That's the core of it all.
Yeah, because I think in general, I'd love for her to work with me again and properly and full time. But I think the business would have to be a lot bigger so that we could have that kind of separation. And maybe that potentially helps you and Zoe because you both do different things within the business because she kind of manages web and design, I guess, and you manage video. That's my understanding from the outside.
Yeah,
I don't know.
And that whole dynamic has evolved so much as well. So the way we see our role splitting out now is that she's almost an ops manager. So she's excellent at making sure everything functions. She's amazing at process. She loves detail. She's really good at driving client relationships forward. This sounds so stupid. I'm more of an ideas man, which feels like a get out clause. It's like, oh, I get to go and play and have great ideas, but that's genuinely where my strength is. Like Zoe is the best doer of things, and I'm the imaginer. But that whole dynamic still only works when you both understand that. So there's a concept of the implementer, and it comes from EOS, Rocket Fuel, the book. So you've got implementers and dreamers, basically. So Zoe's the implementer, I'm the dreamer. And as long as you understand where each other's strengths are, then you can kind of keep the dynamic working in the right sort of way.
Do you always understand that from the beginning?
No, God, no. That's taken lots of time to learn. But I suppose that's one of the real strengths of working with your partner is that you do learn about yourself and the other person really fast. Like we must be more in tune and in step than two founders who aren't together and would have been working together 20, 30 years. Like we're really in sync, really in sync.
How long it took to adjust to each other, adjust all process and company? Because I can imagine when you start, you just jump in to do everything same time, all together.
Yeah.
No matter what. And sounds now like it's all separated. Like, it was some transition period, or you have a talk or something like this shouldn't happen like that anymore.
No, I know what you're getting at, but it was more organic than that. And I think the way because I love analogies and I'm a very kind of visual thinker, there's a bit of a Venn diagram. So we both kind of have our own core specialist bits, but we cross over in the middle. So as long as you're really clear on how that middle bit works and who looks after certain bits in that middle bit, then I think you'll be okay. But yeah, there was never a talk where you sit down and map out exactly how it's going to. I wish it worked that way. That would be a whole lot kind of easier. But no, it was much more kind of organic than that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, much more organic.
And just kind of latching onto that then with the sort of organic change of Epix. So how did Epix change over time? Did services pivot as you grew? Did you change the business model as you grew?
So we've been, I think it's fair to say, I don't think Zoe will mind me saying this too much, but Epix is sort of an accident, right? And I've said that a few times. We didn't really set out to build what it's become, but I think you can sometimes reach really interesting destinations by not setting a course too early. I think there's, like, if you're exploring a creative idea and you set yourself off in one direction, you're ignoring so much potential. And I think as long as you've got some really solid commercials and some solid principles, you can kind of let your business surface area kind of wander, the service levels you provide. So Epix originally was video and web. We expanded to bring in design. We expanded that to bring in a kind of marketing function. It stayed at that sort of service profile for a few years. What we've done now is sort of backed marketing off a little bit. There's a few customers that we do work with on an ongoing basis where we can deliver amazing value, but we don't generally push marketing because our real strength now is in strategy. Like, that's our real emerging value driver for businesses and brands. So what we are now really is this whole kind of brand studio for businesses that are going through major growth stages that want to talk to their customers in a really human way. That's where our ultimate kind of value is. So yeah, it's evolved, and it's definitely evolved based on where clients have pulled us. But I say clients have pulled us, that's where we've let ourselves go, if that makes sense. What we're getting better at now is saying, do you know what, we're maybe not the best fit for that thing, but how does it feel if we look at tackling your challenge in this way? And we kind of bring more and more clients along on that journey, and that tends to be where there's more value.
Yeah, I think, I've got fairly limited business experience. The business has been going 4 years. 2 of those, it's been a real kind of business, and only 1 and a bit of those has been a profitable, actual, real business. But from what I've seen, sitting on the sidelines of talking to people and looking at businesses and just kind of listening as well, because we're in quite a small city, people talk, but I think a lot of businesses kind of get dragged everywhere by saying yes, and creative businesses. I think it's a really, really easy tendency to fall into, especially as a semi-new business, is to just say yes because there's some more money in it. So something that I'm quite conscious of is saying yes to the right things. And I don't know exactly what direction I want to go in as a business, but I know what feels right and wrong. And I know what we're good at and what we're not good at. Yeah. And it's more about saying no to things so that when that perfect yes comes along, you're in the position to be able to do it and deliver on it and deliver on it well.
That's such an important piece of wisdom to have, right? So I think for most businesses, whatever their sector is, they're going to probably say yes to all sorts of things in the early stages just to have that feeling of traction. Then you'll get to this point further down when you start to question whether, do you want to start to take the reins of this thing? I think as a creative, and I think this is especially a problem in the creative sector, I think it's naturally full of people who are really dedicated to serving others. It feels like that. There's so many stories I've heard of, people burning out because a customer wants something at the last minute and they go, yeah, I will push. So I think that's a factor in why so many agencies do, like you suggested, kind of wander a bit and don't necessarily have the strictest, like most refined sense of direction and purpose. And you're right, like learning to say no is kind of core to getting control of the kind of runaway horse eventually. I'm using so many analogies here. I'm all over the shop, but the no bit is hard, and it takes real conviction and bravery to sort of stand up and say, do you know what? Actually, I don't think I'm the best, or my business is the best solution for you. And that's kind of what you have to bring yourself around to, is that you're almost, in some cases, doing a client a disservice by saying yes and not being the best person for them.
Yeah, and I've had a couple of, there's been like 2 inquiries this week where people have been like, I've got this project, so what do you reckon? And it's like, we really need to talk because I have no idea whether it's something for us or not. And I still think that some of the inquiries that come in, when they're cold and they introduce their project and I say, look, let's sit down, talk about it, because we might be the right people for it. We might not be, but if we're not, I'll tell you who is. I don't think they trust me at that point. And they're like, why would you? Well, no, you're going to, kind of lure me in and then take the project. And I'm kind of not, we don't need the projects at the moment. We've got enough to tick along, but I definitely don't have enough capacity to take on the wrong project.
Yeah. I think it's always, same time, it's hard to, when you're saying people no, do not offend your client potential, because they might think that you just don't like them or don't want to work with them. So it's just really need to be careful when you say something like that I'm not the right person for you. Like, I will suggest you someone else.
Yeah, 100%. Because there's not many situations outside of business where you would walk into a shop, for example, and say, hi, I'd like this. And they go, don't think we're the shop for you. Like, that's quite a weird concept, right?
Is that not like a Gucci sales tactic? Is it
fair,
Gucci or something? What's the
Only if you're Russian.
Yeah, what's it called now? Like Tucci. It's exactly
No,
the same
I mean, like,
shit.
they banned, so a lot of brands like Gucci, Dior, they restrict to sell to Russians because of war in Europe.
Yeah.
And they require passport and visa, and if you like have no permit to live in Europe or wherever, they tell you like, we can't sell you that. Sorry.
Yeah. I think I saw something about that though. There was some research somewhere that said for luxury brands where people are buying it as an aspirational purchase to try and fit into some kind of segment that they imagine themselves to be, if during that kind of buying process the salesperson says like, no, it makes them work harder to be like, no, screw you, I can take it. I don't know
what you mean.
So
don't get your point.
Okay, so for instance, like handbags, like really expensive handbag, it's like a couple of grand. I don't know if that's really expensive. Obviously for me it is, but I don't know how expensive bags get. But then if I was really rude to you, I was like, no, I don't think you can afford it. Then you'd be like, yeah, I can. Watch me. It's a thing.
Oh, it's that kind of one-upmanship thing.
Yeah.
There must be all sorts of that in the luxury goods game, where they position off price, like add a zero to make it feel more exclusive. Yeah.
I went down an online rabbit hole of YouTube on that. It was really interesting. So now every time someone wants to buy something, you can't afford it. You can't afford our website. You can't afford our design.
But it's one of the ways out of that is to niche. And I think that's what Bjorn, when you had him on, sort of touched on. So Bjorn, I believe the story is right, that set up a kind of web agency, then niched into kitchens, bathrooms, and something else.
Bedrooms.
Yeah. So what he found there was that probably, again, speaking for him, but he probably found that he could deliver an awful lot of value faster if he niched into one sector. So that whole concept of niching into a specific value prop or need or sector is one of the ways around that, is to just focus on being the specialist in one thing, because then naturally you qualify out those people who aren't best for you, where you can't deliver the best value for them. So yeah, that's an option as well. So what do you think you might end up niching into if you ever went down that route?
I don't know. I was going to say gambling as a joke, but I wouldn't work with anyone like that. I don't think.
Why not?
Gambling brands are tough. Yeah, because the ethics on that is difficult.
Yeah.
Why not?
Because you're directly responsible. Because in our industry, we're there to help business, essentially, regardless of all the other goals, you're there to help them earn more money. And in gambling, you're helping them ruin more lives. And that's the kind of, to help one, you've got to give the other. So I don't think so. Edgar's dad owned casinos, so
well, it was before, but I saw like many people who are suffering from gambling, but same time there's much more people suffering from alcohol and from other things what are completely legal, and nobody care about selling alcohol in every store and it's very cheap, but so much fuss about gambling where people go on their wheel insane and they just go play there with their own money what they earned. So like, I don't know, if people want to do it.
Yeah, I think so. Because actually this is a really fascinating area of kind of discussion, right? So I think the agency sector, because it has the power to influence, decisions and thinking and all this sort of stuff, and it really likes the sound of its own voice, thinks that it sometimes needs to be the champion for what's right and what's good. So I mean, at Epix, certainly we try, well, I say we try, that's wrong. We just don't work with brands where we don't think there's an ethical fit. But I mean, to your point, like, is that right for us to decide? I don't know. I mean, we certainly feel better not working with defense. We don't work with gambling. We don't work with, in fact, one of the weirdest ones was when a defense company they weren't able to confirm to us whether what they did or delivered had lethal consequences. Like, okay, right. I definitely don't feel good about that. Yeah. So we backed well out of that.
One of our clients builds things that go in one direction very, very fast and don't return.
Is it like a DHL?
With DHL, I don't think they get there very fast. They just do they get there?
Yeah. I think it's more probably related to what were your own boundaries, because the other things, what are ethical, what not. I guess it's questionable.
Yeah, I think for us, we see Epix as its own entity. I think that's really important. Is if you can get to the stage where you separate mentally your agency from yourselves. We think it's not necessarily helpful for Epix's personality to be built up by those sorts of contentious issues. So I think there's been quite a big debate recently in the agency sector, or certainly this year, around Shell's ad account coming up for review soon. So you've got lots of agencies that will kind of claim to be very green and eco-focused in order to win certain contracts, but then go and quite happily take Shell's. And it's like, this is quite tough. Like, which side of history do you want to be on? What kind of things do you want to be part of?
I think Shell just bought I think Shell just greenwashed a new electric parking thing in.
Yeah, they have a lot of investments in the
massive
green sector. They buy a lot of solar companies,
God will.
wind
you need
companies.
To get greenwashed more.
But this is, again, intentions, I think, what this company is doing for these changes. It's more about the business, more about the earning money instead of environment and sustainability, because they not really care, because they still doing the old business and they just expanded the network when oil will be not available, so they can sell electricity. So it's questionable, but same, you can go really far with it. Like, then don't do advertising for car companies because they kill an air, or like that some products can be tested on animals, or I don't know. And it's, if you start to really go deep in it,
it's one of those things though where I think it almost, you don't necessarily have to do everything. You don't have to be perfect, right? But if you're at least making progress in the right direction, that's really important. So like there's a big focus in the agency sector for, at the minute, a lot of conversation around B Corp certifications. So yeah, going down the route of Tommy Smirk says he's thought about this and has thoughts. Well, let's come back to those in a minute. And it's for those that don't know, it's kind of about this really ethical approach to business where you put people, planet, and profit on equal footing. So the idea is that any decision where you're thinking about profit, let's work out what the effect is on planet and people as well. And we've looked into it, and I really like the idea of measuring all these things up. So at Epix, we do a few things. We really try to focus on sustainability of any reusable, disposable products. We try to use reusable ones instead. Little things like we get soap and washing up liquid from a refillable shop in Lincoln, and it's, you know,
The one at Rock Retro.
we do know that one. Yeah, we use a couple. We use Greens as well, and Lincoln Eco Pantry. Shout out to them up the top of the hill. So we try to, you know, support ethical brands where we can. All of our vehicle mileage has been electric since 2021, but we did a lot of electric mileage through COVID too. So that's good. These are nice kind of things to be helping with, and it's you know, it's kind of a privilege to be able to, you know, do those things. So yeah, I think it would be nice if more businesses in general thought about their effects and, you know, impacts on the environment. But you don't necessarily have to be perfect, but just be slightly better than you were last year. That will help us move in the right direction, I think.
Do you think? Well, I don't know how it was with EpixMEDIA. Is it was changed at some point? Because you always like obviously on market 12 years, yeah, like something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's a
About
good question. Yeah. So when did that switch flick?
Yeah, so for new businesses, it's very hard sometimes to go green because electric cars are expensive, the green energy expensive, recyclable things are expensive. And if you will, at the start especially, look on your clients like, oh, I'm going to work with you or I'm not going to work with you. So this is put you in really hard position. So how it was with Epix.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I suppose one thing I'll start with is this idea that green things are expensive. It's not necessarily that they're expensive. It's that the non-green alternative is cheap because there's exploitation somewhere. So, you know, a certain high street retailer, you can go and buy a t-shirt for £3. Well, there's something wrong in that. Like, you shouldn't be able to do that, because if it was fair trade cotton and it, you know, was grown ethically and made by people who were being paid properly, it should cost more. You know, so that's how I see the value of things sometimes. So for us, a big switch probably happened. I think it's probably me and Zoe really that started thinking more about this. And then we had a particular team member who came on board who was really into the kind of vegan movement and just taught us a huge amount about things we just had no idea about. One of them was around just how many cosmetics can't be certified cruelty-free because of how they're tested. So there's so often tested on animals because the brands that sell them, when they sell, and I believe this is correct, when they sell into China, they have to test on animals to prove that it's safe for human use. So by buying those brands in the UK, you're kind of supporting the continuation of that practice elsewhere. And that kind of thing really opened our minds. And, you know, you can imagine if you're putting on makeup every morning and that idea is in your mind that poor little bunny rabbits have had stuff rubbed in their eyes in order to, you know, allow you to buy the things you've bought, that starts to feel quite wrong. And I think one of the biggest reasons we started to focus more on environmental impact, it was one little anecdote that someone said, which was every plastic toothbrush you've ever owned is still on the planet somewhere.
I think I still have it.
I've only had one.
You've only had one. But that really like flicked a switch for me. Like, I think I'd heard that and then we went
They're not incinerated.
Lots of
I don't know if
lots
it's
of waste isn't.
I don't know.
Lots of waste isn't. It's mad that, you know, that, and that's one little part of our consumption that is still on the planet somewhere. So
yeah, I think it's really difficult, isn't it? My view, in general, obviously, I think businesses should try and be as sustainable as possible. And well, I can see that you obviously are. I also think there's kind of a catch-22 there with what you think is sustainable. The question is it? So, for instance, I know you've got a Tesla. Would it have been more sustainable for you to have just bought an old second-hand car rather than a Tesla?
I'd love to have the sums that prove that definitively, but I'm actually not sure.
Don't know. And it's like, you know, I'm a fan of electric cars. We talked about it on the podcast a few weeks ago with Ed Crowther. Great guy. Spoke a lot about kind of climate change, sustainability in general. I think that one of the things we brought up there was about the batteries. The batteries are just so bad for exploitation. I think probably are they worse than that £3 Primark t-shirt? And it's all these questions where I don't know the answers. And I think that, yeah, we should all try and be as sustainable as possible. But I think that it needs to come, in my opinion, from top down, from government down. There needs to be the policy there.
It's almost too big a problem for an individual to work out.
I think so.
That's the thing. And lots of it's confusing and lots of it conflicts. So
yeah,
it's tough at the minute to know what is best, because I'm not sure how clear that is.
But you always can be green on some little things, like don't let water when you wash hands flash for 5 minutes, or you just take tub once a month, not every day, and some little things. You recycle your garbage, use less. Don't use the plastic bags in stores. Like some little things what can help. It's affordable to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. Little gains. Lots of people making lots of little steps is better than a few people trying to be extreme.
So when you switch to the more sustainable way of having a business, does it affect your financial, the income of the business? Do you start to have less clients? Or do you have to say no to some of your existing clients?
Anyone out of range of the Tesla? I'm sorry, you're 260 miles away. We only take clients 248 away.
Joe, I'm going to have to lay out now as well. I'm not a Tesla fanboy. It was very tax efficient.
That's very tax efficient, aren't they?
And actually, I'm not even going to say his name, but
don't you have an MX-5 as well?
Yeah, that doesn't move. That's the different bit.
Doesn't move. It
sits in the garage. But yeah, it's kind of hard owning. No, I don't own it. I lease it.
Even better. There's the maintenance included.
Well,
with the tire plan and.
God, I wish it was. It's expensive, right? But yeah, it's tough at the minute. Running something that
is 1% big tax.
Wow. that is from a brand owned by a particular entrepreneur whose name I'd rather not say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's difficult at the minute. I've definitely weighed up whether I agree with that particular person's style of doing business.
That's possible.
The one of the things with electric cars though is that it's not as hard to switch as you think. So we've been using it as our crew car for video shoots for the best part of 3 years now, and it's never been a problem. It's never been a problem.
What is it? Model Y.
So it's a Model 3. It's the long range one.
Yeah.
So yeah, the only thing it takes is just a little bit more planning. So the best analogy I've got is like if you were going to go down to London on the train for a day, going to have a big day using your phone for sat nav and for sorting out restaurant reses and tickets and all that sort of stuff, you'd probably have run out of power by the time you got to the end of the day. So what would you have done? You've probably taken your charger with you and you just stop for 5 minutes and stick it on charge in a restaurant or whatever, in a coffee shop. That's all you have to do with the car. Just think forward a little bit and go, am I likely to use up all the battery? Yeah, right, well then stop somewhere. It's a quick sort of mental switch, but then
how long could it take to charge?
So you rarely charge it from 0 to 100, and that's what takes the longest. So the chances are you're just topping it up.
But if you travel, for example, to London and back, is it enough on one charge, or you need to stop?
So I tend to stop once, and it's 15 minutes. So by the time you've grabbed a coffee from the service station, you're back in it. Yeah,
that's probably the same time what you spend in with petrol car on the gas station. If you get a coffee, some hot dog or something.
And the thing with if you're lucky enough to have a space to charge it at home, which not everyone does, that's one of the things that has to be sorted out. Well, the thing with petrol cars is you always have to drive to a petrol station. And you're always going out of your way to do that. Whereas if you can charge at home, it's always ready to go from home. So you save a lot of time. So the people, kind of forget that that's part of the equation in all of this. Go, oh no, I don't want to sit at a charger for 15 minutes. You rarely have to. And you never have to go out of your way to go to a petrol station.
Have solar panels?
No.
Is it expensive to charge at home?
No, it's fine. As long as you get the right kind of tariff.
Like the split tariffs, do they still exist where it's like cheaper at night?
Yeah. So we charge ours overnight, and it costs very little, very very little.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, in general, I think
it's just got no personality, though, has it?
You have no personality as well, but come on.
Well, can we go back to Epix? I really want to find out more about your processes, and particularly if we've got time, it'd be great to hear about the software you use and potentially a bit of onboarding, how you onboard clients, how you find clients, then kind of transition them to, well, into clients. So software, what do you use? And I know that's a really broad question. So I'll narrow it down with like project management software first. What do you use for that? How do you manage projects?
So our project management systems kind of evolved a lot over time, just basically as we've worked out what tools are going to work best for the kinds of things we want to achieve. And I think most agencies will have a different answer to the question of like, which one should you use? So I certainly wouldn't want to kind of recommend a particular one, but we used to use Basecamp quite a lot. That was really good up until a certain point. So it was really good for holding, key project data in one place, and we could even invite clients into it. We used to run a few projects where clients could see all of the updates live and they could see progress and this sort of thing. So nowadays we use something that's just a bit more complex called ClickUp, which is much more
as well.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of time to get it right, but once everyone's driving within it, it's it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think I've just released like the 3rd build of ClickUp. So I think that's kind of what you're kind of alluding to, really, is that these bits of software are great if they're working for you. Yeah. But it's so easy for project management software, I think, to work against your team.
Yeah. And it's really easzy as a founder to work against your team by getting too excited by new pieces of tech.
And overbuilding.
Yeah. So I'd love, there was a point where I really wanted to use Notion, like, because I'd seen YouTube videos about how to use Notion. Look at these amazing things you can set up. The problem is if you start getting excited about the tool and not the problem you're trying to solve, then you're just causing different problems. Like it's not what a tool's for. You don't invent ways to use it. It should be solving problems for you already. So yeah, it's so tricky trying to stop yourself from getting excited by the shiny new things and to just focus on actually being efficient.
So how often do you make kind of updates and changes in ClickUp to the actual processes in there, or have you just kind of let it fester? And
you can't let it fester, but then we don't tinker with it that much. The reason I'm sort of pausing, I'm thinking, do we do things in big leaps like that? We don't. We probably constantly tweak, change, adapt. In fact, that's kind of what Epix does. That's always been in our culture, is everyone's got the ability to kind of put their hand up and say, do you know what, I think there's a better way of doing this, but it's got to be a better way that's sustainable. That's the main thing. And that's not necessarily in the kind of global climate change sustainability sense, but can this be replicated? Does the use case for doing this thing or the reasoning for doing this thing kind of replicate? Yeah.
Yeah, I got a mini bollocking from Laura, who she's a copywriter for us. So I changed something in ClickUp and she was like, this is just a joke now. Like the amount of notifications that were being generated by some automation that I'd made. And it was so clunky. So yeah, it kind of forced me through the team being like, come on, to go in and completely overhaul it. I think it'll probably be done again, but it's looking a lot better now. The notification spam's down. But yeah, I think it's, if you ever want to learn more about it and someone uses ClickUp, there's a woman on YouTube called Layla at Process Driven, it's called. She has like 80 videos, most of them about ClickUp, and it's a very interesting watch.
Do you watch her before you mess things up?
Yeah, I did actually. I watched like all of the videos, just everything before I even touched anything, because I was like, I don't really understand how this works, and there's so much to it. I think that can be really overwhelming too. And small businesses, startups, when they don't have many projects, or established businesses that don't have many projects, maybe they don't need something like that. But I think most businesses do. I think agencies definitely probably need to. Definitely, probably, maybe. Not sure.
Definitely, maybe.
Can't
Great album.
I guess it depends how big how big is your team?
Yeah, so we're a team of 9, and we've got the equivalent, I think, of 4.5 kind of full-time fee earners. I hate that term, fee earners, but it's creatives making great things. So
money.
Do you know what? Actually, this is another thing with Epix. We've never thought really about the money ever. And I think that's some people will like, oh my God, that sounds stupid. We get other things right and the money happens. That's been our philosophy all along. So really focus on people, focus on getting the processes nailed, so that you can replicate them, do great work, and then the money sorts itself. Yeah. So, but yeah, in terms of like project management, you've got to be really clear. You've got to be consistent. And that's another thing some agencies will struggle with, is that as the kinds of projects that they're taking on evolve and change and differ and this sort of thing, that they let the processes slip because there's kind of cracks in the system. Like you can't use the same process all the time for a product that keeps evolving and changing and this sort of thing.
I think it's really easy to forget that.
Yeah.
Or to not know it.
Yeah.
And then figure it out, which was where I ended up. I think it was around the time we did the momentum workshops together, where I just realized that everything was all over the place. And I was kind of at a loose end, I think, because there was like loads of projects happening, but I just kind of pushed myself towards a cliff where I either had to turn around and fight everything with better processes and more organization, or just jump off the cliff. And not a metaphorical cliff either. just go, I can't do it anymore. This is not what I wanted.
Yeah. It's because agencies really are kind of factories. They're just ideas factories, which sounds like they're really just the worst kind of consultancy phrase. But they're ideas factories. But what you can't do is have all of the outputs looking the same. They can be made in the same way, but they can't look the same. And I think what some agencies will do, the problem they fall into, is that they forget that their factory has got so many machines that are really good at making certain things, and then they try to make different things with those machines. So, you'll get a social agency that are really, really good at planning written content, and then they'll get a brief that comes in that involves more video and photography than they can really handle in-house, but then they'll have a stab anyway. And so, well, hold on, that's not really what your factory is good at making. Like, you can build another bit of your factory to handle that. That needs thinking about to that level. But the more you try and just squeeze stuff into your process, the more problems you come into, I think.
Do you have that? Because you have a fairly sizable team now for an agency. When you get things across your door that you aren't a great fit for, but part of the project you can do you outsource the rest? Do you turn the project away? How do you sort of make that distinction? So, for instance, with video work, we partner with Edgar. So Edgar does the work, and we're really transparent about that. So the client will pay us, we'll pay Edgar. And yeah, it works.
You're like a middleman.
Like a middleman, yeah.
Adding no value to the process along the way.
Excuse me.
Try to, but it's sometimes not value.
I'm the ideas guy.
The ideas guy, so they get
sure,
that's valuable.
And the ideas guy needs to get paid.
And then I say, like, please, no ideas. Let me just do ideas.
Yeah. So this is the thing, actually, I feel Edgar's pain, right? When you're a videographer trying to solve lots of problems, and then you've got a client over your shoulder who's one detached from the end client trying to give you direction. It's like, honestly, please just let me solve this. I'll give you the suggestion. That's where the value comes from. Because if you just become a kind of, camera operator by proxy, where you're like a puppet and someone's that, you don't get the best work that way. So lay off Edgar. Let him do his thing.
I said you do your own thing, You need to be an ideas man.
Yeah. After sending the script and say, like, oh, I write how the things should be. Do your thing. And I'm like, no, it's not how it should be.
Was it what for Will?
And I say like that, please, like, let me just write it down and I will send you and you like take a look after. Don't waste your time. And you're like, no, I already done it.
I was doing it. I've not even looked at it, to be honest. What a waste of time. I was so pissed off as well. It was writing in my Google Doc. I don't know if you've ever had an argument over Google Docs before.
I've seen them.
Bro, shut the fuck up.
I've seen them on client-side docs, yeah, where internal teams are kind of wrestling with ideas and you kind of, God, I think you're forgetting that I can see all this drama kicking off.
Yeah.
It was fun.
It's all good fun,
We'll do it again.
Yeah, I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
And then I just copy and pasted everything from the doc, deleted it, and then moved to another doc and sent him it later, and then he ruined it. What have we got on here? Nothing. Oh, shit. It's not even the right company name. This says Oracel.
Shady. I don't run that. I'm afraid.
So for me, because I barely have any stuff, I realized that most of the project manager software is slowing down all my processes.
Yeah.
Because most of the people work with, they're already in my office and we sit in one office, and it's just easier to just turn around and say, then put in task, send email, and then ask, do you read it?
Yes.
Because it's just, it's slowing down. Plus it's expensive. Plus it's just overcomplicating things in a way.
You'll get to a tipping point potentially at maybe like 5 or 6 people where having things documented and having logs of what was discussed becomes really valuable. So if you're kind of running a couple of projects concurrently, that's not too bad. What I would still say though is that you've got to think through, you've got to play that war game where it's like, what happens if I get hit by a bus tomorrow and I can't come in for a month? Like, how does the studio run without me? Is there too much in my head? And I think that is a real risk for smaller agencies where they have maybe employed 1 or 2, is that too much sits in the founder's head. So yeah, there's not really that resilience there. If something went wrong, you'd maybe be in a bit of a bind. But I agree, you can't have processes for processes' sake. You can't have systems for systems' sake, because if it's slowing down the creation of the work, well, then that's not serving the agency right.
The other thing that if I have a bigger projects like commercial or ads, I'm hiring freelancers and different teams. And if I have a system, we have to work with each other like a couple weeks. I can't teach them to use all of this click-clack systems like my tables, Google Docs. It should be really simple. So I just use like Excel tables or something, presentations or chat in messengers. So we just can communicate easily, accessible for everyone. So everyone equal, no like big trouble, no learning new stuff for everyone. So try to make everything efficient. So I just have prepared documents like templates for different kind of projects. With timetables, like schedules, for presentations for something. So I can give them easy to use. And I have even like a proposal or the templates for presentations in different software. So I have like for PowerPoint, for Keynote, for different ones saved for Illustrator. So if person tell me, oh, I'm using only Windows, I have only PowerPoint, I have the solution for him, which is use the same design, same assets, same everything. So they can create document with same assets in different programs.
Well, I think for an agency of our size, we're at the point where we have to kind of log all of the thinking that's taken us to a point. So especially with the kind of strategy work we're doing, that a brand project now can be 60 to 70% research and kind of developing ideas, and all of that has to be documented because we have to be able to see the flow. I think for video projects, especially if you're commissioning freelancers, your job isn't to give everyone all of the information, it's to give them as little as they need and no more. Like, you don't need your freelance cam op to know that, oh, I've been talking to this client for 6 months and here's the background behind this project. All they need to know is, here's what we're roughly shooting, or here's ideally precisely what we're shooting shot by shot, be at this place at this time, and here's who you're working with. Because if you complicate it any more than that, potentially you're sort of eroding their ability to clearly think through the challenges they've got to solve. You can't overload those creatives with stuff that's irrelevant.
I'm agree. The other thing, same related to this, one of my directors I was working with, he told me that it was one of my first big projects, and I was so excited about it. And I like, why they don't care? Why they don't want to like little overwork? Why they like want me to overpay them for it and this and this, and they want special lunch boxes for them and all of that. And it was drive me crazy. And he said like, bro, like it's big project for you and you have it like once in 2-3 months. They have it every day. Different agencies, different projects, commercials. So you just work for them and they have like 20 filming days a month.
I think that's a really important insight as well. For anyone running an agency, is to think through how much your project matters to your client. Because in some cases, like to the agency, it can feel really big. It can feel like you want to give everything. It's keeping you up at night. You're walking through a town and you're kind of having those ideas, and you'll have the light bulb moments will be kicking off. To your client or to the business you're working with, this might be nothing on their radar. Like, it might sounds horrible, but it might mean very little to them. And that's one of the weird aspects of the creative sector, is that the agency owners and the agency, the creators within agencies give their soul for these projects. Like you invest emotionally, and you become really vulnerable. You put yourself on the line, like emotionally. But it may be going to a company or, people that on the grand scheme of things don't even think about it.
Yeah, they just open notification on phone, see it one time, say like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's weird, but I think you have to be okay with that, and you have to create your own pride in what you do, I think.
Talking about clients, was there a particular client that you took on as a business that was kind of like that big one that Edgar was talking about, the one that pushed you forward as an agency? Because in my, again, fairly limited experience, what I'm finding when it comes to growth, it's kind of chicken and egg. You're kind of waiting. Are you waiting for the big project, or are you going to increase capacity and then, spend money marketing, running ads, to try and bring the clients in? So I'm just wondering, for you, was there a big client that helped you springboard, or how did you go about growing?
Yeah, I think that there probably is one, and I'll talk about them in a sec. I think we've always thought that it's less important that we have big brand names than we take on projects that we can be really proud of. So actually in Epix's history, one of the ones I'm kind of most proud of is that for years, I alone, because I had to do it on my own to make it financially work, we went and supported the Active Lincolnshire Sports People of the Year kind of awards, right? So it's quite a modest event, but it celebrated like elite athletes and also people who had improved their health through physical fitness, right? So I've sat there and interviewed and got really amazing stories from, Olympians, the most dedicated, incredible people you can ever imagine. One of those Olympians really opened up to me and said, I've got to be honest, I don't even like the sport I do. I just like winning. And it was the weirdest thing. Like, this is someone who gifted with an incredible talent for what they do. And it's a burden to them, but they like winning, so they do it anyway. And that was nuts. It was absolutely nuts. I've interviewed people who were, they had terminal illnesses, and, they were kind of opening up to the fact that this is probably the last year they'll be able to be involved in this. And, you're kind of leading people through some really emotional, difficult moments. And those were tough. So, we're really proud of some of the moments we've captured, especially on the video side. We're really proud of some of the brands we've built because of the energy it's then gone and enabled a business to take off with. And these aren't household names, but, we can really sort of hold our heads high and be proud of what we did. But in terms of that client that, that does, that is a household name, probably the biggest one is Timberland. So we supported them with the rollout of their UK and EU autumn 2020 1920
you were around
campaign.
then, weren't you? 1920.
So I forgot,
was around.
You remember that?
Yeah.
Because it's fashion. It's 19 sorry,
COVID
that.
time, yeah.
Yeah,
But,
1920. You just finished the war. You remember you had the flu, and you got that new Timberland shirt.
There you go. But it was one of those amazing projects, and we took it on. To be fair, it was one of those I talked about earlier where it was a bit of a stretch for us. Like we were really good at organizing video shoots at that point, and this was a photography shoot. So we pulled together a really good crew. It was a big budget project for us at that time.
Freelance crew.
There was a mix of 2 from Epix, 2 photographers I'd worked with before on previous projects. We brought in 2 videographers, and then we pulled in a stylist and makeup artist.
So it's a little bit like when you playing GTA 5 and you have to do a heist, and then you've got the whiteboard, and you.
Thankfully, nothing was stolen on this shoot, which is good. But
Not even a pen.
so what was amazing about that is we were working with a US based brand manager. So that was the first time Epix had worked really closely with someone overseas. But we worked out how to keep all the comms and processes running really well on that. We absolutely smashed the shoot. What we delivered, the client was blown away by. They loved the fact that an agency like ours was able to deliver to that level at that sort of cost as well. They really, really liked how clever we were with budgets, because they're just so used to being ripped off by bigger agencies to whom Timberland wasn't even necessarily the biggest brand on their books. Like this, because we forget this as agencies, that to the very biggest agencies, brands that are household names to most aren't even that big. When you're vying for Coca-Cola or McDonald's contract, you'll look down your nose at KFC. Do you know what I mean? Which is nuts. Most agencies would be chuffed to have a brand that big on their books.
I'd work for KFC for free if they fed me.
Yeah, most people. I mean, the agency that came up with the FCK bucket thing we were talking about earlier. Do you remember that? When they had those issues with chicken delivery, that was just an amazing piece of creative. But yeah, so Timberland was one of our really big standout clients, and I think what stood out, well, what we took from that the most was this just big boost of confidence that actually, do you know what, we can play on an international stage and deliver stuff that really makes a difference. And they ended up using what we created far more than was ever intended. So it went into a catalogue. It then also got used for exhibition materials. It was used on their social across the UK, Europe, and I think most of the world ex-US for a while. It was amazing. And the thing that got in the way of that relationship going further, COVID, annoyingly. So yeah, some business decisions got made on their side that meant they didn't market out of the UK anymore. They moved it all into Europe, and never went anywhere else.
So by the time you'd finished that project, was it still a good earner?
So it was a one-off kind of project, and it was like I say, a sizable one for us. But the best thing it gave us was that confidence boost. We're stronger than we realize, and we can go and kind of hold our head high and go in for things that do feel a bit big and scary.
Plus, I think there's one thing you probably realize, that client is a client anyway. They're not much different. The process is not much different than smaller brands.
No,
sometimes it's even simpler.
Yeah, well, exactly. And what was funny is that at higher budgets, there are, there's more options to solve the problem, but also weirdly, the client is kind of calmer about the budget and the problem, because they've already
it all before.
Exactly.
And they're invested in it, and they have people to actually push the project along rather than pull it back.
Yeah. So on their side, they have the processes to feel confident in how everything's been done. Yeah. So it was remarkable as well for being so smooth. For how complex it was really, really smooth.
I think my biggest projects, they was easiest one. They was not easy projects, but it just was going everything smooth, because everyone responsible for own thing. Client is understand what they want and what marks they need to do. Like, we work as a team. Everything is working. We have enough budget because it's everything planned. So and then you get smaller budget client, like real little one, and they just drain you of like everything from you, what they can from.
Well, when you're having to kind of take on the roles of a crew of multiple people in order to get the job done, the client naturally gets less percentage of effort on each individual role. So, on the Timberland shoot, if we'd had to manage wardrobe, which is making sure everyone's wearing the right outfit, and then manage the styling of it, so make sure things are tucked in correctly and pinned right so things sit at the right level, and then to dirty it up because it was workwear, you can't have it clean. It just looks wrong. You're not going to sell it to the people that matter. If we tried to do that ourselves, the project would have taken 1 or 2 weeks instead of 3 days, and they wouldn't have got a better result. It might have been slightly cheaper, but it wouldn't have been better. No way. So I think the investment sometimes in doing projects bigger so you can bring more specialists in delivers way more value.
Just quickly, because we're pushing time and has got something short to do, which should be fun. We're gonna have a wrestling match.
Nice.
I'm gonna win.
Bring it on.
I've put a $5 on myself. How did you find that work?
So it's one of those organic ones where it came to us through a string of previous connections. So I've tried to trace it back, and I actually can't find the point where it began, right? But we'd worked with a Timberland sister brand on something. So Timberland are part of a company called VFC, who are an enormous owner of clothing brands.
Venice fried chicken.
Joe, I actually don't even know what VFC stands for. That's bad. Well, it's VF Corporation, but I don't know what the VF is. I have to check in with contacts.
Venice fried, I think.
That'd be very posh fried chicken.
I don't know if Venice is expensive.
I don't know if Venice is famous for its chicken. It'd only be like a small outlet.
I got the shits really bad after I went to Venice in April, so I'm not. Yeah, I drank the tap water. I know.
I could see Ed shuffling in his seat, thinking, "I'm gonna have to cut this bit."
Yeah.
No, I will leave this part.
Okay, good. So so we'd worked with Dickies. Basically, we'd done a piece for them, a sort of corporate comms style piece, selling or promoting Dickies workwear into builders merchants. So really nice little piece promoting the benefits that builders merchants can get by building a sort of Dickies shop in their store. And that work got picked up and noticed, and Timberland came knocking. And
okay, so they came to you.
Yeah,
that was exciting.
It was really interesting seeing that email land.
Yeah,
you go.
Do you think it was fake?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
of course you do. You triage it, and then you check someone on LinkedIn and go, okay, that's a real person, and that's a real face. This is an interesting one. But it was a fascinating project to be part of.
Okay, so on to the fun bit. Wrestling match.
Nice. Ding ding, round one.
Yeah, so what we're going to do, we have a list of the kind of like questions, topics, which we'll pass to each other and kind of like try to answer.
Yep.
We are not prepared for it. So so if you have a chance to work with any brand on any project in the world, what the brand it would be, what product or service it will be, right? What kind of project?
So it would be, and this goes completely counter to everything we said earlier about kind of eco-friendliness. It's Aston Martin. I'd love to work with Aston Martin. The reason is we have an amazing piece of artwork in our studio, which was done by a guy called Pop Bancolor. If you find him on Instagram, his stuff's incredible. It's a guy called Ian Cook. His whole thing is that he paints pictures using remote control cars. It's an incredible method, right? Back in Epix's early days, we did some pieces with him, some time-lapse pieces, watching various kind of pieces come together, artworks come together. And he very kindly made a piece for us. So he made the Epix logo in, I think it's like 8 foot wide. No, it's probably longer than that. It's like 8 by 6. It's enormous, this piece he's done for us. He made it in a garage at Silverstone when the Brit Car 24 was on. And there were some guys in the garage next to us, and I just kind of left them to it. Their car was out. And it was only when we got back that I realized, like, I clicked two things together. I realized that was the chief exec of Aston Martin at the time, was stood 2 feet from me, and I didn't think to stop and talk to him. So that's always felt like the brand that got away.
They've been taken over now.
So what kind of project will be?
Do you know what I'd love to do with them is just do the real kind of classic, go and take an Aston through the south of France and capture just the most beautiful natural imagery. Because as a camera operator, I was always better at observational stuff. I much prefer waiting for great moments to happen than trying to create them and then feeling false. So I was always a more kind of observational, reportage style cam op. So kind of just being around something that's designed beautifully. And maybe we'll have to wait till they've got an electric one. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do it that way. And just waiting for the most kind of beautiful light to start to come to happen, and just being at one with that moment. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah. So Aston Martin, you still have a time to build up electric car.
Yeah. Lawrence Stroll, hit him up.
So what about you?
Probably a racing series. I had no idea.
Racing series of what? Do what for them?
Cars. So the marketing, like brand marketing for a full series.
Okay.
That would be really cool.
Do they do in teams by teams or no?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you could market for a team. I think that would be interesting too. I guess the sort of gold standard of all of that would be the actual series, though, to bring more fans into a sport. and into a championship. I think in the UK, the car racing, I'd say the British touring cars is big. GT racing is my favorite. I think British GT as a series could do with a bigger fan base, so they probably need the help. But there's also like, GT Challenge Europe, which is probably my favorite one. But I just think it'd be really interesting because you get to go to watch the sport. I mean, I do anyway, but I wouldn't have to pay for it. I'd get paid to go, hopefully well. But I just think there's so much around sport that, like Drive to Survive, the like Netflix F1 series has shown that if you can humanize a driver or an athlete, people will watch the sport because it's like the age-old saying, like sales saying that, people buy people, but I think people buy into people.
You're right. Drive to Survive has done amazing things for F1. It's brought so many people into it, and you're right. If you can humanize things, there's so much loveliness in that.
Yeah, and I think that championships in general are becoming more aware now that if you can get a driver on a camera regularly, people will watch the sport. I think there are certain drivers, up and down different series that are making the most of social. So there's a guy called Dirk. I think you follow him on Instagram, don't you? Races the Porsche Carrera, something. I don't know.
Not Carrera. It's the GT3.
Yeah, the GT3 Cup. But yeah, I just think that I genuinely I understand the sport well enough. I understand what makes people buy into the sport. So a fuse between those, plus I really enjoy it. It would be awesome. And there are loads of championships. Like there's Britcar in the UK, BTCC. Yeah, there's so many rounds. You could travel. It'd be really good.
Do you think you would be standing for the sign with printed your own stuff?
Yeah, it's like, Daddy, who's that fat guy over there? Oh, he's the one that makes the reels. Yeah. What about you?
I think, it will be boring, but again, I'll go with cars as well. And before it would be BMW, but I worked with BMW before, so now it will be Porsche. And it will be just advertising, video advertising, some for campaign launching, preferable 911.
You know what I think we should do, right? Okay, is make like a 3-company tender to GT Challenge Europe. You can work with the Aston. No, there isn't an Aston team. No, there is. There's one Aston on the grid, I think.
Oh.
Or it might be a GT4. Anyway, you can work with them. You can work with Porsche. You've got the new 992 Porsche. That'd be cool. And then I can go in the hospitality while you're in the garages, and I can eat loads of food, and I can pay someone to make reels.
There is no loser in this situation.
Absolutely no loser. In fact, I'll be gaining weight.
Yes.
Next,
if you could swap, if you had to swap jobs with one of, what do you mean?
Can you change?
I don't know what you mean by that.
If for one day you can swap jobs, so like 24 hours, you can work in any job, any position, what job it would be and why?
This is a great question. I like this one a lot. One that instantly comes to mind, right? So back when I was employed, we were doing lots of video projects for offshore wind farms and all this sort of stuff. The great thing about those is that you get to travel a lot because the stuff comes from all over the world. So we went over to Sweden and we were watching them build this undersea cable. So it doesn't sound that exotic, but actually it's fascinating. If you've got a curious mind, it's wonderful to watch. So they make these like multi-kilometer long reels of cable, and then they get loaded onto a ship. So we rock up 8 o'clock, ready to film, and the factory was far too chilled. They were like, "Oh, it's okay, just take your time, it's fine. We'll go for coffee first." So then by 10 o'clock, finally, you start rolling, and it all felt a bit stressful. We'd organised for a dinghy, like a rib, to take us around the boat, because the boat that loads these cables on is enormous. So we get on the boat and we sort of start off, and you go nice and slow because you don't want to rock the camera off. And Then they pause the loading of the cable, and we just take a minute to talk to the captain. So what is it you do? He says, so basically I kind of run dinghies around here in the summer. That's kind of what I do. So, okay, what do you do in the winter then? So I'll just go up to the mountains and teach people how to ski. So what's your main job? I said, no, that's what I do. I make enough money driving people around on boats in the summer and then teach them how to ski in the winter. That's my job. And at that moment, I was like, you know what? I admire you a lot. Like, you don't worry about career. You do only what's fun. You get to explore. Like, you've got it made. So yeah, I think that I'd take that guy's job only for a day because he deserves to get it back because he's sorted his life.
So for me, I'm having a bit of a crisis because I was thinking I'd love to do the marketing for a racing series. Why the hell am I not doing that?
You can do that.
Why am I doing this?
Choose something else. Real job.
Real job. You sound like my mum. But I really enjoyed it. Get a real job.
Let me give you one more example like that, right? So me and Zoe once went traveling around the west coast of the States. We went from Vancouver all the way down. And we stopped in this place, I think it was called Lincoln City, right? And it's up in the northwest anyway. Weirdly, there's just a 10-mile long set of sand dunes. So it's about 10 miles long and a mile wide. If you go there are people that will take you out on sand rails. So like dune buggies, but long ones. So we paid this guy and he takes 4 of us round. And I said, again, how did you get into this? I've just, I got bored with my job and I just bought a sand rail and I just take people out. So, do you do that all year round? Yeah, pretty much, but make enough money in the summer that I stop. His entire job is to go and play on sand dunes in a V8 sand rail. Yeah, that's not bad.
I once got thrown around in the outskirts of Dubai. Say the outskirts of Dubai. In Dubai. Just outside of the city. Yeah, sand dunes there and in either a Range Rover or a Land Rover. I don't know. But it was like literally going up the dunes and over. And that was awful.
So what? I thought you were talking about the job.
Yeah, that's someone's job.
So would you want to do that for one day? So what not. The job you would choose for one day? Any kind of job. It can be a spaceman, you know?
I'd probably quite like to actually go back to work in fast food for a day, not to eat, but just to remember how hard I used to work for money. I mean, like really hard. So I worked in Subway. I worked in Domino's. That's it. But I worked in them for ages. You're sweating at work. I mean, I was skinnier, apart from at Domino's. Domino's, I put a lot of weight on. There's a photo of how fat I got in episode 1 of this season. But yeah, I think I would go back and do that for a day. You used to have to stand there, there'd be a lunch rush, 2.5 hours. You stood there just sweating. You need a pee. You can't.
Yeah.
You got people to serve.
Yeah. And
it's mad for 7-8 quid an hour.
There's an incredible level of skill. I was in Subway not too long ago and just watching someone work who is at that point of mastery of their craft where they can do 2.5 things at once. So they're already moving something along while turning around and grabbing something else. And, their hands work independently. That level of skill is nuts. But it's just a
Subway robot. The oven's gone off. So you open the oven and then
and
the microwave's gone and then you cut in this.
But it almost becomes like ballet.
Yeah.
Doesn't it? And that level of skill is incredible. It's kind of a shame it's not valued differently.
I worked there for 5-6 years. Just insane. I can make a great sandwich. So you?
I think I would choose to be a fireman. I don't know why. I think I'm brave enough to do it. I will just need better physical condition.
Yeah.
But that would be, I think that's what I was dreaming to do when I was a little kid. Yeah. But then at some point that started to have no sense because it's a whole different lifestyle, whole different career.
We can do a trial. Me and Will will come in tomorrow. Send you a photo of your office just for the match. Just see. And
say you need to get here in 5 minutes or everything will burn. Yeah.
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 What are you doing tomorrow, Will?
Literal baptism of fire. For legal reasons, I was nowhere near here, is what I should say.
Yeah, we're both in Scotland tomorrow, aren't we?
I'm in the middle of the sea. That's probably the safest place to not be culpable for whatever you're about to do.
Yeah. But yeah, I've really enjoyed this episode. It was fun.
One more question.
We haven't got time, I'm afraid. He's got to go. We're late.
I can do one more.
Quick one about software. What you like?
Yeah, but this is bullshit, right? Because you've put
Okay.
what
okay, fine.
main software
Whatever.
would you use if you had a budget of £500 a year? There's no software that I own that's less than that.
I think when you run a creative studio, you're open to the Adobe tax, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of have to pay it.
Is it a
I've
tax
tried
or is it a scam? My God.
for legal reasons. EpixMEDIA has no opinion on whether
They probably would sue us as well.
it's tough.
What a
There really
company.
isn't a feasible alternative. You kind of have to run their stuff, and that's a difficult position to be in. I think for if I had 500 quid and wanted to suggest software to use, I'd almost just say, well, it's more about the skills than the tools. I'd invest it in skills all the way, because skills will trump tools, I think, all the time.
You can't use any software.
I don't know what it is. I think, there is an alternative to, okay, there is and there isn't. So it's great if you use cloud with Adobe stuff. It makes it so easy. Save in the cloud, forget about it. But there's like Affinity Designer. I never used it, but people have shown me them using it, and it's like £50-60. You pay it once, you never pay it again, and it's got all the features you probably need. In fact, it's got, there's like an Illustrator equivalent and there's a Photoshop equivalent, and I think that the Photoshop equivalent you can do vector work in as well.
You can buy it. The Luminance, I think, something like that. I don't remember the exact name, but it's one-time purchase, like £100. It's have Lightroom, Photoshop capabilities.
Yeah.
Well, probably not all the Photoshop, but Lightroom for sure covered. So photographers' requirements covered.
See, I love one-off purchase software, because when I first got into the industry, Creative Suite was a one-off purchase. And what was good is that, it was sometimes buggy, but you learned how to work around the bugs, right? So you kind of learn that, sometimes it'd crash if you made a file name too long. All right, well, I'll not do that anymore. And you kind of work with it. Problem with renting your software is that it changes and updates. So new bugs can be introduced, and all of a sudden, here's a new set of problems I've got to triage, right? So it's difficult.
I don't think how much are you paying a month or a year for Adobe? Do you know, in the company now?
Fairly painful amount, put it that way. Yeah.
It's not worth it. Like it's not worth the monthly rental. They don't update it enough for it to be worth that kind of money. They just don't. And if it was, £400, £500 one-time purchase, it's probably worth it, because you can, if you could use it for years, it's worth it. But even then, like, make a couple of updates to it, and then I'd be happy. But if we're paying like 40, 50 quid a month, every month, for what?
I pay 80.
80.
I mean, shout out to DaVinci for making Resolve one-off purchase. It's amazing.
I have free with cameras, so it's really easy, and I already can switch to DaVinci. I can edit everything in DaVinci. The only thing probably what hold me is Adobe's connection between software with like Illustrator and After Effects. So as soon as that will be solved. So that's the only thing, because I enjoy it more in DaVinci than in Premiere. And even like I use only, I think, After Effects now and Illustrator. That's probably from all suite. But I can buy two programs from their set.
But that's the scam, isn't it?
Yeah, because I need two programs. I don't need 7.
Yeah, but then you have them all. So then why would you get DaVinci?
Yeah,
unless it came free with the camera, you'd never move.
Well, I mean, we've started bringing it into our video workflow just to give us more power in grading. But then we're kind of trying to work out how the process, the general workflow can include it more, because anything we can do to kind of rely less.
I mean, I don't do video, but when I've watched him grade video with all the nodes, is that?
Yeah,
it's an absolute art form. It's incredible.
The only thing I think with DaVinci, the problem is why I can't switch completely. It's still they're doing a lot of updates, really recent, but it's still not stable enough to like do big projects there and not reliable. And if you, for example, if couple creative works on it and you need to share project, it's more complicated. So I think that will be solved like in probably 1-2 years.
Yeah, because you edit this podcast on DaVinci, don't you?
Yeah, just easier, just faster.
Yeah. Shout out to DaVinci.
Yeah. Thanks,
Yeah.
DaVinci.
Yeah. Screw you, Adobe.
This podcast
You
is
scammers.
soon to be sponsored by
DaVinci. No, let's just go for it. This podcast was sponsored by. But yeah, thanks so much for coming.
Pleasure.
I genuinely had a good couple of hours.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Have you enjoyed it, Edgar?
Yeah, it was amazing conversation. Thank you for being guest today.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. Can you do the outro for us in your radio voice?
What would you like me to say?
If you would like
Subscribe.
subscribe.
So people subscribe. Maybe some, I don't know, make them subscribe. Something, say, and look in the camera.
directly in the camera.
If you enjoyed this episode of the TED Talks podcast, subscribe by clicking the button below.
It was the smile. It was brilliant. Thanks.
There you go.
That's all. We see you next week. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and bye.
See ya.